following subject matter is real and only intended for mature audiences. Discretion is advised.
People are dead after deputies say a man went on a shooting rampage.
I knew a week before she died I was going to kill her.
I can tell you the scene out there is absolutely horrific.
Nobody knows where this individual may strike next.
This is 10-Minute Murder.
Welcome to 10-Minute Murder, brief and bingeable true crime. I'm Joe, I'm the host, and thank you for joining today. And before we get started, let me quickly let you know about something. I've been contacted several times about this, so I figure it's worth at least mentioning. I don't know if it's 100% true or not, but better safe than sorry. It's possible that people are trying to either carjack or kidnap women by breaking an egg on their windshield. That sounds strange, so let me explain. Let's say you're a lady, you get in your car, and someone runs up and cracks an egg right on your windshield, like smashes the egg on your windshield. Your two instinctual thoughts would probably be to either turn on the windshield wipers or get out of your car and figure out what this guy's doing. And both of those are the wrong move, because obviously you get out of your car, boom, you got. And if you flip on your windshield wipers, then you've smeared that egg and you can't see to drive off. So the recommendation is to put that thing in drive and get out of there. Now, I'll be honest, it does sound a little bit urban legendy to me, like someone's just making some stuff up. But now you know, if someone does this to you, don't turn your windshield wipers on, and Lord have mercy, don't get out of your car. Look at me, delivering PSAs like some kind of concerned citizen. Is this how you get a key to the city? I've always wanted a key to the city. Today, we're going to be talking about another serial killer for spooky season. And this serial killer happens to be a non-male serial killer, which is highly unusual, which we will go into. According to the Journal of Forensic Psychiatry and Psychology, only around 16% of all serial killers are female. In fact, they're so rare that the man credited with coming up with the term serial killer, FBI profiler Robert K. Ressler, did not discuss female serial killers in his research. As he said in his 1992 book, Whoever Fights Monsters, there's been only one female that has, quote, been arrested and accused as a serial killer, Aileen Wuornos. And Aileen was not just an exception to the rule of serial killers being mostly white males in their 20s and 30s, but she also did not fit the typical characteristics of a female serial killer. Aileen killed outdoors instead of at home, she used a gun instead of poison, and killed strangers instead of friends or family. Still, in a letter to her friend Dawn, Aileen said that she never wanted to kill in the first place. So what drove her to take the lives of 7 men and eventually becoming a monster as we know her today? One thing that connects Aileen to her typical male serial killer counterparts is her horrifying childhood. According to a 2005 study, 50% of serial killers had been psychologically abused as children, while 36% experienced physical abuse. Unfortunately, Aileen was not an exception. She was born on February 29, 1956, in Rochester, Michigan, to minor parents. Her mother, Diane Wuornos, had been barely 14 when she married 16-year-old Leo Dale Pittman. The marriage was filled with abuse and jealousy, Leo trying to control Diane in every way he could. But when Leo was arrested for auto theft in 1955 and sent to basic training in the Army, Diane filed for divorce. Aileen, born just a couple months later, never met her father, and her father later committed suicide in prison in 1969, where he had been because he was sent there for sex crimes against children. Long before Leo killed himself in prison, in 1960, Diane also decided that she was not mother material, so she abandoned Aileen and her older brother Keith, leaving them to be raised by their grandparents, Laurie and Britta Wuornos. Unfortunately, the change did not offer much improvement to the lives of the siblings. Laurie and Britta seemed to be strict but loving parents to their children, Laurie and Barry, who remember their childhood as being almost idyllic, at least normal like everyone else's. But for Aileen and Keith, it was a very different story. Both Laurie and Britta were heavy drinkers. And by the way, Laurie is Lauri, and that's the grandfather. I realize he's got a different kind of name, and Britta is what you use to filter water, but those were their names. And Laurie was especially abusive toward his grandchildren. One of the neighbors said, quote, "He didn't treat them like human beings. He treated them worse than anybody could treat an animal." And she wasn't wrong. Aileen suffered frequent beatings from her grandfather and also later claimed that she was repeatedly raped by multiple family members. At the same time, Aileen was sexually abused by boys and men in her school and the neighborhood in return for cigarettes, booze, and food. And it's important to understand the difference here. In many sources, it is said that Aileen began engaging in sexual activities in trade for pocket change, like it was no big deal. But the truth is, she was a minor, only 11 when it all started. The Convention on the Rights of the Child's Protocol on the Child Prostitution emphasizes that even if apparent consent is given, the child is a victim of exploitation, and that Aileen was, at this point in her life, a victim. As a result of continuous sexual abuse, Aileen eventually became pregnant at the age of 14. The father was never identified, but most likely it was an older friend of Aileen's grandfather. Forced out of the home, Aileen gave birth in a home for unwed mothers in Detroit on March 23, 1971, and the child was put up for adoption. A few months after her son's birth, Aileen dropped out of school, and around the same time, her grandfather died of liver failure due to excessive drinking. And curiously, Britta's daughter Lori maintained she knew nothing of her mother's drinking, and Diane, Aileen's mother, even suspected that her father was a murderer. So either Lori proved to be an even more horrible person, or more likely, as it is in typical alcoholic families, nobody saw or accepted the truth. And for that reason, nobody got the help they desperately needed. They were a toxic family with secrets they never discussed. Aileen tried to live in the Wuornos family home for some time, but in the end, her grandfather kicked her out of the house. Now homeless and living in the woods, Aileen turned to illegal sex work and theft to support herself. By the age of 18, she had moved to burglary and more serious crimes, which also meant more severe consequences. On May 27, 1974, Aileen was jailed in Jefferson County, Colorado for disorderly conduct, drunk driving, and firing a .22 caliber pistol from a moving vehicle. That was definitely not the first or the last time Aileen got into trouble with local law enforcement. During the years, she was arrested numerous times on charges that included armed robbery, check forgery, and auto theft. However, she was never sent to prison for a long time, so Aileen was able to continue on her path of becoming a career criminal and eventually a murderer. There was one occasion when Aileen almost escaped her miserable life. In 1976, she hitchhiked from Colorado to Florida, where she met a wealthy 69-year-old yacht club president, Louis Fell. The two quickly got married, and Aileen moved in with her new husband. It could have been the beginning of a love story, a possibility for Aileen to leave her past behind and start over. But unfortunately, her habits had sunk in too deep. Aileen was a frequent visitor at their local bar, where she often got into fights. She also abused her own husband, even beating him with his cane. As a result, Louis eventually got a restraining order against Aileen, forcing her to return to Michigan. Their marriage was annulled after just 9 weeks. Not too long after, on July 17, 1976, Aileen's brother Keith died of esophageal cancer, leaving her with $10,000 in life insurance money. That money was used to pay a DUI fine and buy a luxury car, which Aileen crashed shortly afterward. Once again without money, Aileen returned to Florida, where she continued to do what she had done best, stealing and causing trouble. Eventually, Aileen was arrested for armed robbery. She was sentenced to prison on May 4, 1982, and released just a year later, on June 30, 1983. Aileen was arrested again in 1986 when one of her sex work customers told police she had pulled a gun on him in his car and demanded $200. The incident was the first warning sign of what was about to come. Then, after years of abuse and failed relationships with men, Aileen finally found what she described as, quote, love beyond imaginable. She met a woman named Tyra Moore, a hotel maid at a Daytona Beach lesbian bar. The two quickly moved in together, living off Wuornos' earnings as a prostitute. It seemed that Aileen was really head over heels for this woman, but in the end, it didn't take long for Tyra to flip on Aileen as soon as things went south. It all started when on July 4th, 1990, Aileen and Tyra abandoned a car after they were involved in an accident. The problem was that the vehicle belonged to one of Aileen's customers, Peter, who had gone missing. Police were able to retrieve fingerprints from the car and found a match, Aileen Wuornos. She was arrested on January 9th, 1991 on an outstanding warrant at The Last Resort, a biker bar in Volusia County. Soon after, police tracked down Tyra in Pennsylvania, who quickly agreed to elicit a confession from Aileen in exchange for immunity. Tyra had some knowledge of Aileen's activities, and now she wanted to make sure she was left out of it all. So much for true love. And so, after 4 days of repeated phone calls, Aileen confessed. But it was not just the owner of the abandoned car. No, there was a lot more. After a miserable life of selling sex to men, being raped and abused and treated like dirt, Aileen had finally lost it. She admitted to killing 7 men, all between 40 and 65 years old, that had approached her for sexual services between 1989 and 1990. The bodies of some were found, some not. Those that were recovered were filled with bullet holes. Aileen claimed that the men tried to assault and rape her, and she killed them all in self-defense. In fact, Aileen's first victim, Richard Mallory, was a convicted rapist, which left many to think if Aileen's claim about her motive was actually true. But then there were those who just saw Aileen as a monster. She went on trial for the murder of Richard Mallory on January 16, 1992. Her defense tried to paint a picture of a troubled woman with borderline personality disorder and an IQ of 81. But despite their best efforts and Aileen's claim she had killed to preserve her own life, the prosecution was able to portray her as a calculating, man-hating killer who lured innocent men to their deaths. Within a year, Aileen was found guilty of 6 murders and sentenced to death. Also 6 times. Aileen ended up spending 10 years on death row. During that time, she grew profoundly disconnected from reality. For example, Aileen claimed that her body was being attacked by sonic waves, and prison matrons were tainting her food with dirt, saliva, and urine. Still, she claimed she was not crazy, saying, quote, "I'm so sick of hearing this, she's crazy stuff. I've been evaluated so many times. I'm competent, sane, and I'm trying to tell the truth. I'm one who seriously hates human life and would kill again." There are so many opinions of Aileen's mental state during her crimes and then after them. And of course, there have been huge debates about if Aileen's past should have been taken into account during trial and sentencing. She went through experiences that most of us can't even imagine, and many feel the system failed her. If someone is as mentally unwell as Aileen, is the death sentence a right choice? However, in Aileen's case, it seemed to be a blessing because she asked for it to hurry up. On October 9th, 2002, at 9:47 a.m., Aileen Wuornos was executed by lethal injection. Her final statement was, "I'd just like to say I'm sailing with the rock, and I'll be back. Like Independence Day with Jesus, June 6th, just like the movie, big mothership and all. I'll be back." Aileen has definitely not come back from death, but she lives in news articles and books, documentaries, and movies. And even though the title is not exactly accurate, she is still remembered as America's first female serial killer. That's 10-Minute Murder for today. Brief and bingeable true crime. Thanks for joining, and I remember when that movie came out, Monster, with Charlize Theron. I remember when they announced it that she was going to play the role of Aileen Wuornos, and I thought, there's no way. She's not going to look the part. She's way too pretty to be this rough serial killer that just has lived this horrible life. But she did. And she won an Academy Award for that, by the way. If you haven't seen the movie Monster, it's pretty good. It's definitely worth a watch during spooky season. Hey, if you are not subscribed to 10-Minute Murder, make sure you do that before this episode ends. Click the subscribe button wherever you're listening right now. It could say subscribe, it might say follow or collect or anything like that. Just click it, and when you do, you become a subscriber of 10-Minute Murder. It doesn't cost you anything. The only thing that it does do for you is to make sure that you don't miss any of the future episodes. You don't have to go searching for it every time you want to listen to 10-Minute Murder because you're already subscribed. The episodes are going to be right there, and you're going to get them as soon as they come out. Also connect with 10-Minute Murder on social media. The links are in the show notes of this episode. Facebook and Instagram, you can just type 10-Minute Murder into the search bar, and it's going to pop right up. And I know I've said this before, but I'm going to try to do better at Twitter. I just don't pay much attention to Twitter. I don't know why. I mean, it's a completely normal app to use. I just don't. It's like I've reached that threshold of all of the different social medias that I can handle, and Twitter didn't make the cut for a long time. But I'm trying. I'm trying to do some more stuff there. So follow on Twitter and help me out there. And lastly, one thing that I haven't mentioned in a while, but the way that this show grows is by you letting other people know about the show. And I've been so lucky with those of you that are listening to this show. You have been sharing the show with your friends and family and coworkers and anyone else that you think may be interested in brief and bingeable true crime. So the show has continued to grow, but I feel like I need to mention it every now and then just to make sure. You know what I mean? So if you know someone that is for sure into true crime, don't just spring it on them like, hey, you like killers? You got to warm them up somehow. But if they are into true crime, let them know about 10 Minute Murder. Thanks for listening. Have a good night.